I came across an essay in New York Magazine that was published at the beginning of the month, and I wanted to dive into it because it talks about cheating with AI in higher education, and I think there's a lot of different fundamental shifts happening in society right now. Like, yes, AI is going to take jobs, it's also going to create jobs, it's going to disrupt the economy, but we have to also think about all the systems and structures that we currently have in place and how AI is going to fundamentally change these things. So when I say like systems and structures, I'm talking about like the social contract, like how we interact with one another. Government, like how does government work in an era of AI when people are no longer working and earning taxable income? And one of these kind of really core foundational areas that we have to talk about is higher education. I think by now most people probably agree that college is a scam. I very much do. I think it was a complete and utter waste of time. I think I'm 33, so I've been out of college now. I graduated in 2013, so 12 years. And I have not seen the returns on my college degree. And yes, I did get a job in my field, like perfectly in line with everything I had studied. But I realized once I was in my career that the only way to advance was to develop a social network and social capital, and my college experience hadn't prepared me for that. And this is something that this essay is actually going to touch on a little bit. But for most people, and maybe this is a cynical view, so like take it with a grain of salt, but for most people, the value in going to college is like going to Harvard and getting the Harvard branding and getting access to the Harvard network and meeting other people within Harvard. If you don't go to Harvard, if you don't go to like a top brand school, like there's no real value for it. Like, sure, it can help you get a job in some fields, like engineering. You definitely do need a college degree. I guess depending on what you want to do, right? Like you'll need a college degree. But for most people, like you don't need a college degree. Like if you're going to go into marketing, for example, like there's enough courses online. You can learn marketing through Coursera, and like really businesses want to hire you based on proof that you can do the work. So like they're not going to hire you because you've got a 4.0 GPA in marketing from a state school. They're going to hire you because you can 3x, 4x, 5x, whatever the return on ad spend, and you've demonstrated proof that you can manage a social media campaign, or you can do this, or you can do that, right? Like that's what employers are looking for. So I think there's a fundamental disconnect between the job market and what employers want and the labor market and how they're being prepared to enter the job market. And so college to me is a total scam, and then there's other aspects of it we could go into as well, like the administrative side is completely bloated, and the same way that like the government bureaucracy is bloated. Like administrative staff at universities are superfluous, and so your college tuition dollars are going to that. I mean, the government is subsidizing it through student loans, so there's no market force regulators involved as long as the government keeps doling out money. Universities are going to keep creating bullshit graduate degrees and certifications and programs, and again, like unless you go to a top tier school, it doesn't really matter. And like I say this, I went to Syracuse, so like not a no-name school, not like a great school, but not like a no-name school either. Like there is some like network to it. I think it was like in the top 50 ranking when I went there. I think it might have gone down since then, but and in any case, like I went to like a decent school, right? And like I felt I couldn't compete in my field with that. And there's nuance, of course, with everything, but it just goes to say, like, I think the whole structure of higher ed is broken, and the whole value proposition of college is broken, and it's not actually preparing people to enter into the job market with skills that are actually needed or wanted by employers. So like the institution itself is broken, and now I think ChatGPT has officially killed it. And this raises a really fundamental question. Like, it's May 2025, like we have a whole new cadre of college graduates who are walking across stage all month, right? They're officially graduating and entering the job market. They're entering a job market where there are no jobs. So you have all of these kids who are tens of thousands of dollars in debt based on a promise that they're going to get a job to repay that debt. Like, millennials can tell you that it's bullshit. Like, those jobs don't exist. And so these kids are they've been led to slaughter, economic slaughter, and they have no options. But what the worst part of it is that in addition to the college grads who are graduating right now, you have high school seniors who are walking across stages. Right now, I graduated in June in my high school, so this month, next month, you have millions of high school seniors who are graduating, and in August they're going to be starting college, and in 4 years, in 2029, they're going to be graduating. And based on what this essay talks about, based on the structural problems within higher education, the lack of job opportunities that currently exist for Gen Z, and now like the displacement coming from AI, like these kids are being set up for failure, and they need the adults in the room because they don't know any better, right? You're 17, 18, 19 years old, you don't know any better. They need the adults in the room, the teachers, the parents, the guidance counselors to tell them otherwise, and no one is stepping up to the plate to do so, and I'm hoping to do that. And I don't really have reach with Gen Z because I'm not on social media. I think it's toxic and parasitic, so like I'm not on TikTok or Instagram or all that stuff. So I'm hoping like this being on YouTube will help, but these kids need to know what they're up against because it's a huge problem. They're being set up for failure. So let's dive in. So this is an essay that was published in New York Mag. I do want to disclose I found the link to this on LinkedIn, so someone else shared it. So take that for what it's worth. But yeah, let's dive in. So the introduction of this article talks about this kid who basically had gotten into Harvard. He screwed around his senior year. Harvard rescinded his offer. He ended up going to community college while he was applying to schools. He applied to 26 schools, didn't get in, eventually got into Columbia. And his whole reason for going to an Ivy League school wasn't for the education, it was to find a co-founder and a wife. So right off the bat, we're seeing how the value proposition of college itself has changed. So, and maybe I'm injecting my own bias here, but when I went to college, I seriously thought people would go to coffee shops and sit around and debate Montesquieu and Rousseau and Kant and Nietzsche and have intellectual conversations, kind of like the French salons during the right before the French Revolution, and kind of that period of time during the Enlightenment, right? I thought that was what was going to happen, and I was really disappointed to learn everyone just went to parties and got drunk all the time. So that is my own disappointment and idealism of what I think college should be. But in any case, this highlights people aren't actually going to college to learn. So college isn't a place of learning. Really, it's a place of credentialism, and then it's a place of building human connections. And kind of like I was saying before, if you go to a prestigious school or an Ivy League school, your chances of being successful, whether that's finding a startup co-founder, a spouse, or getting the credentials you need to land a good job after college, it's coming from a handful of schools. So college itself has lost the value proposition. And another thing that is kind of a side note that isn't really related to AI, but this kid talks about how he applied to 26 schools and he didn't get into any of them. So you have, he's obviously super smart, right? He got into Harvard at first, then he eventually got into Columbia. So either Columbia has reduced their admissions, which based on the protests happening on their campus, maybe that's possible. They just accept anyone anymore. But maybe this also could signify things have gotten super competitive. And I've read other posts from Reddit that have been reposted onto X, kind of saying the same thing. You have these super smart kids, well-rounded, perfect SAT scores, and they're not getting into school. So the whole process of even getting into college at this point is also broken. And so our society is built on the credentialism that schools provide. Like, that's how you get access to the job market. But then, like, your social capital that you can generate within, like, your life, your adult life, also comes from college. And so if kids aren't getting into college, and this social expectation is that they need to have a college degree and they need to go to college, like, what's going to become of these kids? You know, like, what happens when, like, you've been set up for failure, and, like, you're told your worth is based on your GPA and the job you can get, and that doesn't come to fruition. You can't get a job. Like, you're not getting into college. You know, maybe it's a good thing, but maybe not. Like, we have a fundamental problem of how society itself is structured, and, like, what we value, and, like, we provide dignity to. And so this is why, like, this is such a fundamental problem, because it's not just like, oh, higher ed is broken. It's like, we derive dignity from the accomplishments we achieve, and those are often mapped back to career and college. And if those two things are gone, like, who are we? Like, how do you exist? And I think at the end of this, you'll see, like, this kid is either sees the writing on the wall and just doesn't care, or he's, like, become super cynical. Okay, so one of the things they talk about in this essay is how one of the reasons why AI has become problematic on college campuses is because there's no universal application of an AI policy. It's kind of done on an ad hoc basis, and professors are just kind of doing whatever they think they need to do. So some are letting people use AI, some aren't. And so this is just kind of giving students a carte blanche to use AI at their discretion. Let me see, okay. According to this, when ChatGPT launched, so it was end of 2022, yeah. So within a few months, 90% of students were using it, which is so basically at this point, like 100% of students are using it, and I think almost everyone is, and I advocate using it. I use it too, not for, like, the content I write on Substack, but for a lot of freelance content. Just because, again, like, I'm with these kids, like, I see the writing on the wall too. One thing I want to comment, so this article is structured, the writer interviewed a bunch of college students and professors, and so this person he interviewed, her name's Sarah. She talks about how ChatGPT changed her life because it allowed her to get good grades, and then it concludes by talking about how she can write essays in a few hours, something that used to take her 12 hours, and what she's doing is she's spending more of her free time on social media, especially TikTok. So there's two things that are implied here. So one, grades are irrelevant. Like, if anyone can, like, bullshit their way through assignments and get a grade on using ChatGPT, it's the same thing as counterfeiting, right? Like, if you were to just go home and print a bunch of money on your computer, obviously it's illegal, right? But, like, the government does that, so I think this is a good analogy, right? Like, the government goes and prints a bunch of money all willy-nilly, adds more money to the circulation of cash in the economy, leads to inflation, devalues it. Like, the same thing is happening with GPA. So the thing that, like, a lot of these kids are schools are structured around getting a good GPA. You do a bunch of, like, gen ed classes and stuff with the point of getting a good GPA, and GPAs aren't even mapped to, like, your job opportunities after you graduate. So, like, that's, a whole other problem why, like, I think college is a scam. But anyways, like, it's gamified. College is gamified. You're not there to learn, you're there to get a GPA. And now GPAs are basically irrelevant because everyone can use ChatGPT and just bullshit their way through college. So the whole purpose of going to the school and, like, playing the game that higher ed has created, like, everyone's just beating it. And so what are they doing with their time? Like, okay, the first kid is started a company, found a co-founder to start a company. This chick is just scrolling on TikTok. So, like, she's not even doing anything valuable. And I would be curious to know the breakdown of this. I think an Aston Martin just drove by. People are obnoxious sometimes. Sorry if that was really loud. Anyways, I'd be curious to know the breakdown of this. Like, the assumption is this is, like, AI is going to liberate all of us from tedious bullshit work, and we're going to have more time to be creative and entrepreneurial and live our lives. And I think to some extent that is going to be true for some people. But if you're using ChatGPT so you can spend more time on TikTok and you're just scrolling on TikTok, like, I think that's absolutely disastrous for society, humanity, the economy. Like, it literally is Ready Player One. And if you have not watched that movie, it's a book and a movie. Like, go watch the movie. It kind of highlights the world we're heading into. Okay, so the author gets into the crux of what I think is the fundamental problem of higher education. So he interviews a professor, and the professor basically says that the number of students are going to emerge from university with degrees and into the workforce who are essentially illiterate, both in the literal sense and in the sense of being historically illiterate and having no knowledge of their own culture, much less anyone else's. We're talking about an entire generation of learning, perhaps significantly undermined here. It's short-circuiting the learning process, and it's happening fast. So there was a video on X that went viral of a Gen Z teacher who's quitting. She's a 10th grade English teacher, and she's quitting because her students, so in high school, kids no longer read, which kind of blows my mind. I was in AP Lit, both AP Lit and Lang, and we read a novel a week, like, and I'm not even talking like a small novel, like Catch-22, like Steinbeck, kind of Dostoevsky novels. Like, we had to read, and like, yeah, I used tools to assist me. I used at the time, like, Wikipedia wasn't really a thing. I had a laptop, but like no one had computers in school. Like, iPhones were still new. I graduated in 2009, so I used SparkNotes. And I used things to assist me to like make sure I understood the material, but I didn't not read. Like, that was not an option. So I guess today kids aren't reading, like they're giving excerpts, kind of like what you would see on an AP exam or on a standardized test. They're only reading the excerpts. So they're not reading like full-length novels and context. And the teacher who posted the video to X, she basically said the same thing. Like, these kids like can't read the Declaration of Independence. They have no idea what's in it. They don't know what it means. And so you think of, like, zoom out and think about that in the context of what's happening in American politics today. Like, it's no wonder, like, social order is breaking down because we have a whole class of people now who, like, don't understand. They're historically illiterate. Like, they don't understand context. They don't understand how to interpret things within context. They don't understand how to critically think, and they don't understand how to evaluate and analyze things. And it just blows my mind. Like how can you have, so obviously racial issues and racial tensions are big right now. Like, we can't have a conversation about that because we are operating on multiple different frameworks of what slavery was and who's responsible for it today. Like, slavery was a global institution of an economic institution. Like, you had different types of slavery. There was indentured servants. There was obviously slaves. People were bought and sold. Like, the thought that like settlers from Jamestown like went off to Africa and just forced a bunch of Africans off of their land and then brought them here is just preposterous. But that's literally what people are positing right now, and they want to cancel Thomas Jefferson and George Washington because they had slaves. And so like we can't have conversations, and it stems back to reading and learning and critical thinking and analysis and how like what you're supposed to learn in school. So kids aren't learning this. They're going to college. They're further disincentivized from learning, and then they're entering into the workforce. And so we're supposed to have a society of like functional adults, and we don't anymore. And a lot of this stems back to education and how it's degraded over time, and now AI is accelerating this. Okay, let's see what else. Oh, this was a really interesting piece. So he interviews a girl named Wendy who's studying finance, and how she uses AI to write. And she's like, she enjoys writing, but she prefers getting good grades over writing, which again, like, the grades don't matter anymore because the playing field has been totally eliminated. So what's the point? So she's using AI just so she can get good grades. But this author asked her, she had to write like a philosophy paper about critical pedagogy. And she said apparently the philosophy examines the influences of social and political forces on learning and classroom dynamics. And so she used an AI tool, I'm assuming ChatGPT, to write this. And so he asked her if she recognized the irony in using AI to write not just a paper on critical pedagogy, but one that argues learning is what makes us truly human. She wasn't sure what to make of the question. I use AI a lot, like every day, she said, and I do believe it could take away that critical thinking part. So, like, I don't even know how to, like, comment on this, because it's so, like, this, the absurdity of this is so obvious. Like, she has to analyze, like, critical thinking, and she recognizes it's going to go away, but she's still using the tool that's going to destroy critical thinking. It's just fascinating. But the kids are willing to do anything for these grades, and they don't matter. And much the same way, like, we're all willing to work our lives away earning money that's worthless. Like, if you look at how much a dollar is worth, since 1913, it's lost like 97% of its value. So we're all chasing paper that's worthless. And so it's like, why are we doing all of this? And these are important questions to ask, right? Because AI is going to fundamentally change what it means to be human. So, like, we're going to have to ask these questions at some point, because we've structured our lives in a way where we're chasing grades, we're chasing financial wealth, we're chasing all of these things that are suddenly totally irrelevant. And what do our lives mean in the absence of these things? Another element that this essay touches on that I think is important is that professors are now being asked to grade AI-generated content. And this, again, like, teachers, I think most teachers go into teaching because they want to teach. And as the 10th grade English teacher said on X, and as some of the teachers in this, the professors in this essay articulate, like, the whole value proposition of teaching itself has also changed. So if you're just grading an AI generated assignment, like, you're not teaching. Like, if the students aren't literate, they don't have the capacity to learn, and if they're just chasing grades, they don't want to learn. And if they're using tool like AI to just generate bullshit essays to turn into you, like, you have to ask yourself, like, what's the point? Like, why would anyone enter into it? And professors aren't even paid that much money, right? So a lot of these people are probably adjunct professors or people in PhD programs who are teaching gen ed, entry, like, first year college students. Like, what's the point? Like, why would you go into a profession where, like, you're basically teaching brick walls? Like, I think that's fundamental. And so this gets into something that I think that this professor kind of gets at, is that teachers are now in a state of despair. Like, the whole value proposition of teaching is gone because the absence of learning is gone. And I think that the return on teaching for a lot of people is you get to see your students grow. Like, you get to see in real time how, like, your students use critical thinking, they improve their writing, like, they learn new things. Like, you can just see that light bulb moment. And I love, like this is why I write, right? Like, this is why I'm doing, like, I dropped out of the 9-to-5 workforce. I don't work a full-time job. I'm never going to work a full-time job again. Yeah, it's stressful. But this is the reason why I do this. I'm creating this and I'm writing is because I love to learn. I love learning. And I have figured out, like, this is a way I can finance my life and get to do what I love to do. And one of the reasons why I love learning is because it's an opportunity to grow. Like the things I create today may be irrelevant in a year or two, and I'm okay with that because that signifies, like, I have learned. And so by, like, eliminating the learning process, you're also eliminating the growth process. So you're basically institutionalizing infantilism within young people. And I think that's why we're seeing such a problem right now with, like, millennials and young men and women and dating culture, because we have institutionalized infantilism to the point where I wrote a commentary on this, but the New York Times, Wall Street Journal covered, did a piece about how, like, millennials are struggling in the economy, and yeah, the economy sucks. But they interviewed a 38-year-old dude in Brooklyn who had, like, a history degree, and he ran, like, a furniture shop, and he couldn't figure out why he was single and couldn't start a family, like, wasn't dating, couldn't start a family, and was still living with roommates. And it's like, at some point you have to see the writing on the wall and realize, like, Brooklyn's not the place and you need to go somewhere else. But instead, like, these people are just blaming society. Another chick interviewed in that piece, she, like, was like, well, I could move back home and it would be cheaper, but, like, I don't want to give up my lifestyle in LA, and I don't want to give up my Netflix subscription. Like, we've created a culture of like infants, like 30-something-year-old infants. And so like we already have like the precedent of the set for millennials. Like we're not helping ourselves either here. But like now again, like you have literal young adults going through college, cheating their way through. There's no job market at the end. They're not going to grow up. And now like the only tool, like the best time they have to grow and learn, like it's they're like shooting themselves in the foot. Like they're not growing. So where do we go from here? Like this is a big deal. Okay. Blah 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 blah. What else? Okay, so this gets into some of the aspects of AI as it relates to work. So this teacher brings up a really good point. If students rely on AI for their education, what skills would they even bring to the workplace? If you're handing an AI work, you're not actually doing you're not actually anything different than a human assistant to an artificial intelligence engine, and that makes you very easily replaceable. So why would anyone keep you around? And I think that's a really good point. And like in the process, so higher ed is broken. It's been broken for a while. Like I myself also agree, like I haven't learned the things I should have learned in college, and I'm kind of working on course correcting, but for the vast majority of us, like we don't actually have the skills we think we have to critically think and plan for the future, right? So most of us are thinking like what we're gonna have for dinner tonight, but we're not like thinking, you know, what am I gonna eat like 5 months from now, right? Like we don't have that skill anymore. Like we don't plan pantries at home. We don't budget. Like we don't think about like big picture things. We're not thinking about, okay, well, you know, if I grow a garden and my garden only produces X, like what do I need to supplement with it, right? Like, those are skills people had in the past because they had to plan for things, because if they didn't, they would starve. And so because of convenience, like we don't have to plan ahead and think. And so we've lost that skill. And so it's hard to think about what your life is going to look like a year from now, let alone 5. And so that's really important, because kids who are using AI don't see like, okay, if I'm turning in AI work at school, I'm not learning anything. This GPA is bullshit. I'm going tens of thousands of dollars into debt. And oh, by the way, there's no job at the other end of this. And so like they're not thinking ahead, and they're not, because they're not learning skills. Like they're going to be super replaceable. Like they have nothing to offer. And so I think here, you know, this talks about like the deterioration of skills, right? So like problem solving, critical thinking, yada yada yada. And I think in the same way that, you know, millennials were guinea pigs with social media and we didn't really understand how that was going to affect our lives, I think Gen Z are the guinea pigs of AI. And none of us really know what's happening. All these tools are you know, I would say the AI revolution in earnest began in 2016 when AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol in Go. So I think that's when people in Silicon Valley who are building all of these tools like really were like, oh my God, like we're at a point where this is going to take off. And they started like investing heavily into building products that then became public in 2022 with ChatGPT, right? And so I think we're still in the early stages of this. This is kind of feels like 2012 Facebook and like Instagram, iPhone and mobile apps and that kind of stuff. Like none of us knew what that was going to do to us then, but obviously now, like you have Jonathan Haidt who's done research on this. But whistleblowers have come out from Facebook. Like it's done a tremendous amount of harm to young people. So like we know from social media what this could do. So it's clear, I think, that Gen Z is going to be the canary in the coal mine, and they're going to be the active guinea pigs for this. Let's see. Okay, we're getting towards the end here. So they talk about how at the end here that young people benefit from structured adversity, and so that can be chores or algebra. But it helps them build self-esteem and work ethic, and I completely agree with this. Like I run marathons, and it's not easy. It sucks. Like I can't tell you how many injury. I'm working through an injury right now, so overcoming injuries. The whole training process is 18 weeks long. It's grueling. You know, doing a 20-hour or a 20-mile run on a Sunday when all your friends are out having fun, not ideal. You have to get up super early in the summer. Like on my next training, I start training again for my next marathon in about like 5 weeks. And so like getting ready for that, but like running my training schedule is all through summer, and I'm here in Texas, like it's hot as hell. And so you know, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go for a run, like not fun, but through that it does build self-esteem and confidence and work ethic. And it's like, okay, I've done this almost a dozen times at this point. I know I can do this. And it David Goggins is one of my favorite people, but he talks about this. It calluses your mind. Like, the more you do something over and over again, like, the more practice you get, the more reps you put in, the more, like, you hone it and you develop the skill and you cultivate it. And, like, the kids aren't putting in the reps. They're not doing the work. And so they're not learning anything, but they don't have a process to follow either. And so that's why I kind of said, like, I think they're being infantilized. Like, it's learned helplessness. Like, they have no idea now how to overcome adversity. Like, kids already don't know how to, like, change the oil in their car. Like, I sure don't, right? Like, I can't. If something, well, not at the moment, but, you know, a few years ago, if I had an issue with a flat tire, right, like, I would just call AAA, because I wouldn't know how to, like, change a tire, right? It's like kids do that, and it's kind of the same. It's the same thing. Like, it's like, okay, so what happens if you get to a point where, like, the internet goes down? Like, what if there's an outage for several days, which is possible, like we just saw in Spain and Europe. Like, there was a whole power outage because their grid collapsed. Like, what if that happens, like, and you don't know how to work, like, you don't know how to operate a phone, which, like, you think is, you know, funny, but, you know, some people don't know how to operate, like, landline phones. Like, you don't know how to communicate, like, you don't know how to do anything. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, if you're dependent on, say, like, DoorDash coming to your house every night and feeding you, like, you're gonna be SOL when something bad happens. And so, like, we've institutionalized learned helplessness, and these kids are not, like, learning the skills they have to succeed in work or life. Like they are one crisis away from, like, I mean, I don't want to say, like, you know, the worst thing that could happen, but, like, take it to the logical extreme. Like, it's not good. All right, so the last thing that this covers, and it's super, like, there's a lot of ironies within this essay, which is, it's a really good read. But the kid who in the beginning had gotten into Harvard, got kicked out, then applied to 26 different schools, eventually got into Columbia, and said, like, the whole point of going to college is to find a co-founder and a spouse. So he found a co-founder. He ended up, like, creating a product. I think it was, like, a tool that could help you hide using AI on your browser or something like that. But he, like, he got written up at Columbia, violated one of their policies. He then, like, wrote about getting written up on X, and then they kicked him out. So he has no college degree at this point. Like, he went to college, like, basically he failed. In the traditional sense. You can, again, like, there's a philosophical question of whether or not he failed, but, like, and the way we've structured our society, he's, like, flunked out, he's, like, failed, and so he's working on a startup, and so he's building a startup with his co-founder, and he's talking about it. It's called Cluely, and it's going to scan a user's computer screen and listen in its audio in order to provide feedback and answers questions in real time without prompting. They've already raised money, so, like, investors are, you know, signaling to them that it's valuable. But it's interesting because before he talks about it, the author asks him a question, and the kid says, every technological innovation has caused humanity to sit back and think about what work is actually useful. There might have been people complaining about machinery replacing blacksmiths in, like, the 1600s or 1800s, but now it's just accepted that it's useless to learn how to blacksmith. And what's interesting is the same thing now applies to, like, startup world and capital and venture capital. Like, no one is asking if these products should be built. So this kid is building products that no one is actually asking if they should be built, if they are valuable. And because of how venture capital is structured, it really is kind of like a giant betting, like a pony race, and you're just betting on as many companies as you can to maximize your opportunities for return. Like, these kids may not actually be building a good thing. And based on how it's described here, of, like, they did a promo video and he used his product to help him, like, win a date with an older woman, like, I don't know, like that's inauthentic. I think humans are craving human connection and authenticity, and I think a product like this, like, undermines that. But in any case, like, and I've experienced this here in Austin, like, I'm just so over startup culture because a lot of the products they're creating don't actually benefit humanity, and no one's actually asking the question that's really fundamental, like, should we be doing this in the first place? So, like I said, this was published in New York Magazine. I think it's an interesting read for sure. I think we need to start critically thinking about higher education because it's one of the core pillars of our society that is fundamentally broken, and like we have an entire generation of kids we have coddled. They are incapable of learning. They're not developing skills. They have learned helplessness, and they're not going to have jobs. They're not going to have jobs. So we have stranded an entire generation in an economy that does not work, and in a society that does not reward them for work. And so what's the alternative? It's what that girl was saying in the beginning, more time scrolling on TikTok. And I don't think that's good for anyone. That's, if you Ready Player One, WALL-E, like take your movie reference, but I think that's kind of where we're heading. So if you have made it this far and you enjoyed this commentary, I would love it if you would subscribe and follow and share this. I would really appreciate it. It would help me kind of get this off the ground. So yeah, thank you and have a good one.